The cobbles of Weatherfield have always been a repository for the dark, fractured undercurrents of human nature, a place where ordinary lives are routinely dismantled by extraordinary betrayals. Yet, even by the historically tempestuous standards of Coronation Street, the psychological horror and systemic fallout of the Megan Walsh grooming scandal have sent a seismic shudder through the community, one that promises to permanently alter the trajectories of the Driscoll family and those trapped in their immediate orbit. At the epicenter of this unfolding catastrophe stands young Will Driscoll, a teenager whose innocence was systematically weaponized against him by a predatory authority figure, and whose subsequent psychological unraveling has become one of the most harrowing portraits of trauma ever broadcast on British television. The arrival of the Driscoll family in late autumn of the previous year was meant to herald a vibrant new era for the iconic Rovers' return, with Ben Driscoll and his partner, the perennially resilient Eva Price, stepping up as landlord and landlady. They brought with them a blended family dynamic full of hope, unaware that the real threat to their stability lay not within the volatile politics of the street, but in the dark secrets Will had carried with him from their previous life in Hull. The architect of this misery, Megan Walsh, entered the narrative under the innocuous guise of an athletics coach, a dedicated mentor committed to unlocking Will's potential as a competitive runner. In reality, Megan was a master manipulator who used the sanctity of the coach-athlete relationship to build an insidiously claustrophobic wall around the boy, alienating him from his family and fostering a toxic dependency. When the Driscolls made their cross-Pennine move to Manchester, the geographical distance threatened to sever Megan's control, prompting a desperate Will to flee back to Hull under the pretense of intense training. It was during this period that Megan's manipulation deepened, culminating in her bringing the boy back to Weatherfield with a calculated lie designed to disarm his worried father. She claimed to have discovered the vulnerable teenager sleeping in his old changing rooms and, out of pure maternal and professional altruism, had driven him home to safety. This act of manufactured heroism successfully blindfolded Ben and Eva, embedding Megan deeper into the family's consciousness and granting her unrestricted access to her victim under the very noses of his guardians. The true nature of Megan's depravity unfolded in the hidden, shadowy corners of Weatherfield, away from the warm, gossipy glow of the Rovers' return taproom. Secret meetings in the Ginnel became the staging ground for Megan to reinforce her psychological hold over Will, reassuring him with practiced tenderness that she was actively constructing a master plan that would allow them to be together permanently. This false promise of a shared future fueled Will's compliance, leading him to orchestrate a covert overnight stay at a local hotel under the firm belief that he was protecting a grand, star-crossed romance. However, as the logistical challenges of maintaining her illicit connection with a minor in a tightly knit community began to mount, Megan's behavior shifted from affectionate reassurance to cruel emotional withdrawal. She abruptly warned Will that they could no longer meet openly on the cobbles, even suggesting that they sever ties completely. This calculated push-and-pull dynamic left the adolescent completely unmoored, his volatile temper and increasingly withdrawn demeanor sparking deep anxiety within the household. Ben's growing suspicion regarding his son's psychological decline led to an abortive confrontation in the street after he spotted Megan leaving the local corner shop, though his inquiries were expertly deflected by the coach, who reframed Will's distress as standard academic and athletic burnout. Desperate to maintain the illusion of a normal coaching structure while secretly facilitating her proximity to Will, Megan's narrative intertwined with the wider Weatherfield community through the intervention of Will's grandmother, Maggie, and a well-meaning but utterly deceived Eva Price. Together, they arranged for Megan to travel to Manchester twice a week for private training sessions, a compromise that initially delighted the co-conspirators but rapidly accelerated the tragedy. With her foothold in Weatherfield secure, Megan set her sights on social integration, crossing paths with the academic and recently single Daniel Osborne. Recognizing Daniel's professional influence at Weatherfield High, Megan exploited his natural kindness, securing a teaching position through his recommendation. This professional advancement, however, triggered an intense, suffocating wave of jealousy in Will, who watched with escalating fury as his abuser began to publicly socialize with Daniel in the Rovers. To deflect any burgeoning suspicion regarding her inappropriate attachment to her student, Megan deliberately accepted Daniel's invitation to a formal date, a move that went viral within the family circle when a festive gathering saw Eva enthusiastically encouraging a mistletoe kiss between the new couple. The psychological torment inflicted upon Will reached an agonizing crescendo on his 16th birthday, a milestone that should have marked his transition into young adulthood, but instead solidified his status as a captive to Megan's whims. While Ben and Eva were secretly organizing a surprise celebration at home, Will was lured to the high-end Chariot Square Hotel for a rendezvous with Megan. The fragile illusion of their secret world nearly shattered when Ben and Will's younger brother, Ollie, arrived at the venue on unrelated business, forcing a terrified Megan into hiding and compelling Will to fabricate a frantic lie, claiming Megan was merely an old ex-girlfriend from Hull who had tracked him down. This near miss did nothing to deter Megan. Instead, the stakes were raised to an unfathomable degree when she revealed to a stunned Will that she was pregnant with his child. The revelation transformed the dynamic from one of covert grooming to a desperate, high-stakes conspiracy. Though she initially feigned a desire to distance herself for the remainder of the term, Megan ultimately accepted and offered to move into the spare room at Leon Battersby's flat at 2A Coronation Street, bringing the physical manifestation of her crime directly into the immediate neighborhood. Rejected her advances and demanded she leave him alone permanently, Megan turned to emotional gaslighting, weeping and insisting that she believed they were truly in love and could still salvage a friendship. Neither of them realized that their intense encounter was being observed from the periphery by Hope Dobbs. The young girl, who had promised earlier to keep Will's scaffolding meltdown a secret at school, stood frozen in the shadows, witnessing the raw manipulation firsthand before fleeing into the night, a silent witness to a crime that the legal system had yet to fully contain. As Chapter 1 draws to a close, the stage is set for a massive legal and moral reckoning, with a fragile Will trying to reclaim his voice while a predatory shadow continues to loom large over Coronation Street. The legal machinations following Megan Walsh's arrest transformed Weatherfield from a quiet residential enclave into a pressure cooker of public judgment and private agony. When Detective Sergeant Lisa Swain formally processed Megan at the station, she confronted a wall of absolute denial. Megan, maintaining her chillingly composed exterior, weaponized her status as a respected athletics coach to reframe the entire relationship, painting Will Driscoll as an unstable, obsessed teenager whose vivid imagination had fabricated a illicit romance out of standard mentorship. This professional defense, however, began to crack under intense scrutiny when D.S. Swain produced evidence regarding the £2,000 that had vanished from the rover's return safe. The digital trail of booked flights to France and Will's missing passport painted a damning picture of a planned escape, forcing the legal system to construct a complex bail arrangement that kept Megan under strict surveillance but, crucially, left her free to wander the outskirts of Weatherfield while the Crown Prosecution Service finalized its case. The weight of this impending trial pushed the Driscoll household into a state of structural decay, with Ben Driscoll grappling not only with the emotional destruction of his eldest son but also with a profound financial crisis. The loss of the pub's capital, coupled with the relentless gossip echoing across the bar of the Rover's return, eroded Ben's resilient spirit, leaving him vulnerable to the manipulative overtures of his ex-wife, Melanie. Arriving from Scotland with an agenda of her own, Melanie utilized Will's psychological vulnerability to mount a campaign to permanently relocate the boy to Glasgow, claiming the cobbles were inherently toxic to his recovery. This external threat ignited an intense domestic Cold War between Melanie and Will's grandmother, Maggie Driscoll, who fiercely opposed any move that would fracture the family unit. The stakes of this family feud were raised to an apocalyptic level when Melanie attempted to blackmail Maggie, revealing she possessed absolute proof that Maggie had been responsible for her husband's tragic death years prior by pushing him down a flight of stairs. This hidden history of violence, locked away in the family's collective closet, threatened to obliterate Maggie's standing in the community just as she was trying to act as Will's primary emotional anchor. Megan, demonstrating the cunning that defined her predatory nature, successfully eavesdropped on this explosive blackmail confrontation outside the pub. Recognizing an opportunity to neutralize her most formidable adversary, Megan secretly recorded the entire exchange on her mobile phone, using the audio file as leverage to terrorize Maggie during a subsequent face-to-face clash near the local precinct. When Maggie desperately demanded the recording be deleted, Megan simply goaded her, threatening to deliver the audio to the police unless the Driscolls dropped their support for Will's criminal complaint. Maggie, drawing upon the fierce protective instincts that defined her matriarchal role, counterattacked by revealing she had uncovered medical records proving Megan had systematically lied about her pregnancy and had actually undergone a secret abortion weeks prior. This psychological warfare between the two senior women left Will entirely isolated, caught in the crossfire of an adult battleground where his trauma was reduced to currency for blackmail and legal leverage. The collateral damage of Megan's presence extended far beyond the Driscoll bloodline, deeply infecting the lives of the wider Weatherfield community, most notably the young Sam Blakeman and his father figure, Daniel Osborne. Sam, whose analytical mind had originally pierced Megan's facade, remained deeply traumatized by the intense psychological manipulation he had suffered when Megan forced his silence. The young boy's academic performance and mental health went into a steep decline, manifesting in severe anxiety attacks that his father, Nick, rejected her advances and demanded she leave him alone permanently. Megan turned to emotional gaslighting, weeping and insisting that she believed they were truly in love and could still salvage a friendship. Neither of them realized that their intense encounter was being observed from the periphery by Hope Dobbs. The young girl, who had promised earlier to keep Will's scaffolding meltdown a secret at school, stood frozen in the shadows, witnessing the raw manipulation firsthand before fleeing into the night, a silent witness to a crime that the legal system had yet to fully contain. As Chapter 1 draws to a close, the stage is set for a massive legal and moral reckoning, with a fragile Will trying to reclaim his voice while a predatory shadow continues to loom large over Coronation Street. The legal machinations following Megan Walsh's arrest transformed Weatherfield from a quiet residential enclave into a pressure cooker of public judgment and private agony. When Detective Sergeant Lisa Swain formally processed Megan at the station, she confronted a wall of absolute denial. Megan, maintaining her chillingly composed exterior, weaponized her status as a respected athletics coach to reframe the entire relationship, painting Will Driscoll as an unstable, obsessed teenager whose vivid imagination had fabricated a illicit romance out of standard mentorship. This professional defense, however, began to crack under intense scrutiny when D.S. Swain produced evidence regarding the £2,000 that had vanished from the rover's return safe. The digital trail of booked flights to France and Will's missing passport painted a damning picture of a planned escape, forcing the legal system to construct a complex bail arrangement that kept Megan under strict surveillance but, crucially, left her free to wander the outskirts of Weatherfield while the Crown Prosecution Service finalized its case. The weight of this impending trial pushed the Driscoll household into a state of structural decay, with Ben Driscoll grappling not only with the emotional destruction of his eldest son but also with a profound financial crisis. The loss of the pub's capital, coupled with the relentless gossip echoing across the bar of the Rover's return, eroded Ben's resilient spirit, leaving him vulnerable to the manipulative overtures of his ex-wife, Melanie. Arriving from Scotland with an agenda of her own, Melanie utilized Will's psychological vulnerability to mount a campaign to permanently relocate the boy to Glasgow, claiming the cobbles were inherently toxic to his recovery. This external threat ignited an intense domestic Cold War between Melanie and Will's grandmother, Maggie Driscoll, who fiercely opposed any move that would fracture the family unit. The stakes of this family feud were raised to an apocalyptic level when Melanie attempted to blackmail Maggie, revealing she possessed absolute proof that Maggie had been responsible for her husband's tragic death years prior by pushing him down a flight of stairs. This hidden history of violence, locked away in the family's collective closet, threatened to obliterate Maggie's standing in the community just as she was trying to act as Will's primary emotional anchor. Megan, demonstrating the cunning that defined her predatory nature, successfully eavesdropped on this explosive blackmail confrontation outside the pub. Recognizing an opportunity to neutralize her most formidable adversary, Megan secretly recorded the entire exchange on her mobile phone, using the audio file as leverage to terrorize Maggie during a subsequent face-to-face clash near the local precinct. When Maggie desperately demanded the recording be deleted, Megan simply goaded her, threatening to deliver the audio to the police unless the Driscolls dropped their support for Will's criminal complaint. Maggie, drawing upon the fierce protective instincts that defined her matriarchal role, counterattacked by revealing she had uncovered medical records proving Megan had systematically lied about her pregnancy and had actually undergone a secret abortion weeks prior. This psychological warfare between the two senior women left Will entirely isolated, caught in the crossfire of an adult battleground where his trauma was reduced to currency for blackmail and legal leverage. The collateral damage of Megan's presence extended far beyond the Driscoll bloodline, deeply infecting the lives of the wider Weatherfield community, most notably the young Sam Blakeman and his father figure, Daniel Osborne. Sam, whose analytical mind had originally pierced Megan's facade, remained deeply traumatized by the intense psychological manipulation he had suffered when Megan forced his silence. The young boy's academic performance and mental health went into a steep decline, manifesting in severe anxiety attacks that his father, Nick Tilsley, struggled to comprehend. Concurrently, Daniel Osborne found himself drowning in a sea of professional and personal guilt, realizing he had been completely duped by Megan during their brief romantic entanglement. Daniel's early public defense of the coach had effectively alienated him from the Driscolls, and the subsequent realization that he had unknowingly provided a predator with a sanctuary at Weatherfield High triggered a severe emotional unraveling. The situation escalated into a full-scale community crisis when Daniel's young son, Bertie, became the target of vicious playground bullying fueled by malicious, anonymous social media posts under the pseudonym Truth-Teller, forcing Daniel into a furious, obsessive quest to unmask the online troll and reclaim his family's honor. The final act of this psychological thriller unfolded in the desolate, neon-lit concrete expanse of the Freshco supermarket car park, where Megan executed a twisted new plot to completely break Will's resolve before the trial. Using a burner phone to impersonate Lee, Will's old running friend and fellow victim from Hull, Megan orchestrated a digital trap, sending desperate text messages that pleaded for a covert meeting to discuss the court case. Will, seeking solidarity and a sense of shared understanding from the only other person who truly understood the depth of Megan's grooming, walked directly into the trap. Waiting anxiously by the loading bays, the teenager's relief turned to absolute horror as the shadowy figure approaching him materialized not as his childhood friend, but as Megan herself. Holding the stolen £2,000 and dangling the promise of a clean slate in Europe, Megan attempted one final, desperate act of emotional brainwashing, trying to convince the terrified boy that their bond was the only genuine reality in a world that sought to tear them apart. As the headlights of passing cars illuminated the confrontation, Will stood at a definitive moral crossroads, forced to find the internal strength to finally silence the voice of his oppressor or vanish forever into the shadows of her design.